Welcome to Your Success Podcast. We give you actionable insight and stories behind real-life success wherever you go. Here are your hosts, Angelos and Mo.
Welcome to Your Success Podcast. I'm Angelos.
And I'm Mo.
So today we're going to be discussing planning versus firefighting, both in your business and also in general life.
And I think what we're trying to say here is there's a time and a place for both firefighting and planning, and you have to have the flexibility to be able to firefight or deal with things as they come up. But you should always try and plan things out, because it's better to have things planned out in advance so you can actually schedule and things like that. But you do need to have the flexibility to be able to cope with any ad hoc challenges you might have. So, Angelos, how could you be more organised, better planned, and reduce the amount of time you need to spend firefighting?
Okay, so there's quite a few things that you can do. First of all, you need to just adjust your mindset a little bit. As opposed to being reactionary all the time. Perhaps just take a deep breath, stop, and just think, rather than rushing out to fix something or do something, think, okay, what do I need to do in order to achieve this task the most efficient way possible? Is it to rush out and sort it now? Or is there a list of priorities that I need to be cracking on with? Is there a much more important job that needs my attention right now, rather than stopping the job that I'm doing, managing 3-4 different things at the same time? You're not going to do any of those jobs really well.
And I think context is quite important in that respect, isn't it? Because you've got to be able to contextualise what you're doing and what the other thing that's come up is in the context of your vision and your life and what you want to do. So you need to. That's why I think where you said take a step back. That's kind of the putting what you've got to do in the context of the rest of your life and what's important to you and things like that.
Yeah, and also using a calendar and being very strict with your time. If you are tempted with every text message or WhatsApp or whatever it may be, distraction coming along, and then suddenly that report that you need to write or that document the business proposal you need to write is stopped because John down the road wants to go out for a cheeky Nando's, which we are scheduled to do shortly because we've blocked it out in our calendar. It's not going to work because you're not going to be in flow. When you get back, you're chopping and changing, you're losing line of thought all the time. So use the calendar to block your time out, which Jackie Tomes, who we mentioned this in episode 19 on the 1st of January this year, on how to set your goals at work. And one of the things that she said was blocking out time strictly and being disciplined with it. And I've tried it and it works really, really well. You know that you have 1 hour to sort out X task and nothing else is going to distract you along the way, and I think is a very good way. And also starting with the end result or the outcome in mind and work back from there is very, very important.
Yeah, because it's very, very easy to just be a busy fool, isn't it? And just go off in various directions and feel like you're making strides towards where you want to be. But actually, if you haven't started with the end result in mind, you could just be very, very busy and not achieving anything on your list, which I think is linked to creating a list of priorities. So, if you write down the top 3 things you have to do that day, in priority order, even if you only do one of them but you've done the most important, then that's surely the best use of your time.
And sometimes it's the most awkward, most difficult task that you need to do first.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then everything else is a bonus.
Yep.
But normally, because of human nature, we like to do all the little easy things first, and then we avoid doing the hard task, and then suddenly the pressure of time comes into it and you don't do the best job you possibly can. So sometimes doing the hardest job first should be number 1 priority, and then moving from there.
Yeah, definitely.
But also plan, anticipate for the worst. Life isn't always strictly, life doesn't adhere to Angelos's calendar, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to organise the world that way. So you need to, just in case, at least have that flexibility in mind that things will change. You are not rigid in your timekeeping. You won't switch off your phone for an hour. If there's an emergency, you have to respond to it.
And if you plan for the worst, at least you'll be pleasantly surprised when when the worst doesn't always happen. Sometimes it might, but it won't always. But if you have planned for it in terms of time, in terms of financially, in terms of the things you've got to do, then you can only really be pleasantly surprised from there, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, in my previous life, I used to work in the world of IT. And you can't necessarily plan when something is going to go wrong, because these things do just spontaneously go wrong. And if you have an upset user or an angry user because their machine isn't working for whatever reason, you do need to stop what you're doing, because ultimately the top priority is making sure that other members of staff are making sure that their jobs run uninterrupted. So that project that is a top priority suddenly becomes second in the list, because you need to make sure that you don't take your eye off the overall operational efficiency of the business. So specifically in the world of IT, especially when you're looking after systems, you need to be able to both firefight but also plan as well.
Yeah, and I think the parallel in our business is, in the property business, is probably planned versus reactive maintenance. So we've got a schedule of things that we like to do on a regular basis and keep on top of things, but you are going to have reactive maintenance that you have to do, and you're also going to have, especially in the serviced accommodation, kind of short-term accommodation business, you're going to have guests arriving and something might be broken, or they might break something while they're there, and you have to react to that, and they're only there for a couple of days a lot of times, these guests. So you have to sort it out immediately. There's no, we'll come round and pop round and do it tomorrow.
Sorry, Barry, we're not going to go there today, because we've got to focus on the high level stuff, such as reporting the tax.
Yeah, exactly. They're not going to appreciate that. So, but saying that, if you can stay on top, where possible, if you can stay on top of the planned maintenance or cleaning, as you may be able to hear, the cleaners are out in the hall. If you can stay on top of the planned maintenance, that will dramatically reduce the amount of reactive maintenance you have to do. So you have to do that, but then you have to find time for the planned maintenance when you've got a load of reactive stuff. So it is a challenge, but I think it's definitely something you have to focus on.
Yeah, and also another thing you need to consider is controlling your chimp.
Yeah.
Don't instantly react. So the Chimp Paradox, a very, very good book that I can highly recommend, by Professor Steve Peters.
Oh, right.
It's all about your inner chimp
Yeah.
and the way that your chimp reacts to things. It is based on science, so it isn't just a comical thing to remember. So think of it like your computer that is controlled and unemotional, and there are gremlins or issues inside that get into your computer and cause bad habits to form. So the way we should relate that to ourselves is that we are effectively trying to do the job that we're trying to do, using our high level brain power, and then our chimp, our gut instinct sometimes kicks in and stops it.
And it sort of dates back, thousands and thousands of, probably maybe even millions of years. You're the history one, so I'm going to defer to you. But back to sort of just survival, isn't it? So if you're under attack, your immediate response is to kind of respond in an aggressive way. And so, for example, like road rage is such a classic example of the chimp taking over. And you just see red, and you're like, oh, I'm so annoyed. But actually the rational way to respond to that is just to drive away and just to ignore them. But actually the chimp will really want you to fight, because it's millions of years old. Yeah,
I mean, if you look at it from an evolutionary point of view, our brain, we initially evolved from reptiles. We have a reptilian part in our brain, and then we evolved and became monkeys, and we have a monkey, i.e. the chimp part of our brain. And then we have the human element, which is maybe a couple of million years old. I'm not a biologist. And, our gut instincts of fight or flight, and all of these aggressive tendencies, they tend to stem from our reptilian monkey brain. Whereas the human brain is much more evolved, and we think the high level kind of stuff. But, ultimately we are animals. We are glorified chimps, I guess, and we, although we like to think we are quite civilized, when it comes to road rage, it's incredible how people just revert to very animalistic behavior. Talking of animalistic behavior, we do need to be flexible.
Yeah.
And to quote the great philosopher Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And I think that's a very, very good quote there. I think he paraphrased it from other sources, but effectively, all great plans, especially in war, they all go out the window as soon as the first shot is fired. So I think, using a soldier as an example, I think you can relate this quite well to how we work in business. If, let's say, there's sniper fire going on, the soldier has to be able to react instantly. He can't just sit there and plan for the next thing. It has to be an instinctual reaction based on his training. But ultimately, he mustn't forget the overall objective of the day, and that's to rescue the hostages or destroy X, Y, and Z. So there's lots of little reactionary processes, lots of little things that happen, but he mustn't lose sight of the overall goal.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of managing, so to bring it back into sort of I suppose a business work environment, or your life indeed, you could look at something like the Eisenhower Matrix. So that's where you've got, I think people have probably seen it before, where you've got urgent and important, and you've got your urgent tasks. Actually, I've got it here, so I'm going to bring it up so I get it right. So you've got urgent tasks that are important. So that's your top priority. That's really what you've got to do yourself. You've got important tasks that are not urgent. So they're still important, but they don't have to be done right now. They're the things that you should plan to do. So not right now, but make sure they're in the plan. Then you've got not important, urgent tasks that you should delegate out because they're fairly urgent, so they need doing. Someone needs to do them, but maybe a good job for an outsourcer because they're not that important, but they do need to be done. And also, you don't want things to move from not important and urgent into important and urgent because you've let them slip and you've got a final warning or a bailiff letter or whatever. And then the fourth box is not urgent and not important, and that's really where you've got to question whether you need to do that at all and just eliminate it. If it's something that you do need to do, it's not that urgent, it's not that important, but it's a nice to have, you could delegate it as well, but you probably want to try and eliminate that one.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I had to physically stop myself sometimes, especially in the early days of growing my business, to stop reacting to every Tom, Dick and Harry. So, for example, a tenant would have an issue with X. For example, the broadband would go down. So rather than rushing out there immediately, just take a step back, think about it. So rather than always doing, you need to take some thinking time. What could it be? Is it the Wi-Fi? Or is it the actual broadband connection which has gone down? Is it the person's computer? So rather than rushing out to the house like some kind of armed hero rescuing the day, the Jack Bauer of the IT world, I now send an email to the tenant and just break down 5-6 different tests that they could possibly do themselves and maybe fix it themselves, rather than me going out and spending half an hour of my time sorting it out. And that way it has become a habit over these few years and it's saved me a lot of time and hassle.
Definitely, that's a really, really good one. And I think people underestimate the importance of thinking time rather than always doing. So if you hadn't actually taken time to step back and look at all the different times that people have reported, internet's down, looked at all of the different things and said, actually, I've noticed a pattern here where, most of the time it's X or Y, then you can build a process around that and that'll make you more efficient going forward. Whereas some people would look at that as, well, you're not actually doing anything, it's thinking time, so it's not valuable, but it's actually a lot more valuable in the long run.
Yeah, you save yourself time, you build a system around it, so if it happens again, you just send a template email, depending on the variables at the time, and it saves you time, and ultimately that's what we're here to do. We're here to be more efficient, work on our business as opposed to in our business. Definitely something to take on board. And
let's talk about Overwhelm. So Overwhelm is, really everyone has a really long to-do list. No matter how efficient you are at working, it always gets longer if you're a creative person or if you've got your own business or even in family life, you always got more things to do than you've got time to do them. And it's very easy to get overwhelmed, and it's usually the result of not knowing the precise next step that you need to take and be able to see that it's a small enough thing that can be accomplished. So you're looking at this mammoth of a task rather than what is the immediate next action you need to take to move yourself towards it.
Yeah, the example we've got here is eating an elephant.
Yeah.
How do you eat an elephant? Well, the answer is one bite at a time.
Yeah.
I hate to go back to an IT analogy, but
okay.
It works amazingly well. So the first lecture we had when I started uni was the lecturer sat in front of us and explained how a packet of information would travel from your computer right through to the web server and get it back. So it's actually a really complex process. But how does it start? Well, it starts like booking a holiday. So you know where your destination is, and then the next step is, well, I have to get from my home to the airport. So what do I need to do? I need to book a taxi to the coach station. So that's plan A. Then plan B is from the coach station to the airport, and then you need to check in. So that's another little plan. Then you have to make your way from the check-in through security. And you just break it down into these logical little steps, and you write it down if it helps, relieve your brain of that internal pressure of remembering. And then before you know it, you've arrived at your destination and everything is great, or you've eaten your elephant, or you've accomplished the goal. And that's how you do it. Break it down to small little chunks, and then you'll be surprised at how quickly you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that links back to starting with the end result in mind. So you knew the end result was you want to go on holiday, and you just work back from that and really break it down into the constituent parts. But you have to know where you want to go. You wouldn't just get in the taxi and they'd be like, well, where are you going? And you'd be like, I don't know. you got to know where you're going to go to do it. So I think that's really important as well.
Cool. Well, you've heard our thoughts on planning versus firefighting. We would love to know how you deal with overwhelm, and whether you're a firefighter or whether you're a planner or you're a combination of the both. Or a chimp. Yeah. So we want to know your thoughts and experiences about firefighting and planning. So drop us an email on hello@yoursuccesspodcast.com, or get in touch on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram.
So thanks for listening to Your Success Podcast. Click subscribe, leave us a review, and we look forward to your comments on the Your Success Podcast Facebook page or YouTube channel.
And just for listeners at home, a little bit of reassurance, no elephants were harmed through the making of this podcast. So I've been Angelos.
And I've been Mo.
And see you again on the next episode of Your Success Podcast.
You have been listening to Your Success Podcast. Click subscribe for more incredible content. More details can be found at www.yoursuccesspodcast.com.